Well, hey, everybody. What day is it? Oh, it's Mike in the Midwest. Thursday. Getting ready to record the show, episode number 35 already. How about that? All right, let's reset the recording software here and we will get going. Dun, dun, da, da, da. Da, 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 da. Here we go. Happy Thursday, everybody, and welcome to Mike in the Midwest, a mini podcast for the great patrons of the Be Our Guest podcast. My name is Mike Rallman. I'm the host of the Be Our Guest podcast, along with Ricky Niblett and Pam Forster, which, of course, you're a patron of, so you know you can catch us every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then live on Sunday nights. You can call in. And starting this Sunday, don't forget, it's going to be Mike and Scott talking the Disney news at the top of the show. Then you can call in and speak to either one of us in our topic. I'll give you a heads up. You're the first to know. Suggested by one of our great listeners. And I'll give that listener credit on Sunday night. But we're going to be talking about if you have ever had a Disney nightmare, if you have ever woken up in a cold sweat, in a panic in the middle of the night, because something related to your upcoming Walt Disney World trip or maybe a past Disney trip, maybe the one I'm going to give on Sunday night, I'll give you guys a heads up beforehand. Really, I don't have a lot of Disney trip nightmares. I think it's because I'm surrounded by, working in the Disney universe 24/7 all the time at this point. But the one that I always worry about the most, and I've had this nightmare a couple times, is that I'm down for a race weekend and I miss my alarm, especially for a dopey challenge. Like I missed the alarm for like the 5K or the 10K, like one of the races that's not one of the super long ones, but then I'm disqualified from the whole dopey challenge experience. Yeah, I've had that nightmare a few times, but I mean, I don't really have a whole lot of nightmares about, things that could go wrong on my trip. I better knock on wood. But I mean, you could have a nightmare maybe about being stuck in the Haunted Mansion or Tower of Terror or something like that. I don't know. Some people have weird nightmares about just, mundane things at Walt Disney World that freak them out. So that's what we're going to be talking about this Sunday night as we call in. I'm sure Scott's had some in the past, and I'll be repeating this one and go into more detail about what I've thought about, but that's going to be our fun topic. Of course, we'll be talking about the news. We'll also be getting your thoughts on what you think about the Leave a Legacy new colorful monuments outside of Epcot. Are they better? Are they worse? Should they have just left them totally gone? Or what do you think? Should they bring them back? Should you be able to get your mug on a monument if you want? We'll see. So Sunday night, please join us. It'll be 7:00 Eastern, 6:00 Central for 1 hour as we take your calls. And I know a lot of our patrons are our main callers. So I appreciate you guys so much. So last week, what did we talk about? We talked about snow days at in life, and I just lost the feedback page. So let me load that up. Apologies, because I want to get the feedback because I thought it was super interesting on the feedback from last week's show. We talked about how snow days are fun. I gave some perspective, both from when I was a student and from when I was a teacher. And I told you, and this is the honest to God truth, teachers love snow days more than kids by a power of 10 at least. And it's one of those things that, everybody, it's part of the culture, right? Snow days, maybe. I don't know. Maybe it's because I'm from St. Louis. I'm in the Midwest. That snow days are just kind of a rite of passage. Every kid has them here in Missouri, and you look forward to them. Come November, it starts to get, a possibility, and it continues on till about March. But I find it interesting because we got some comments here that I just found pretty, this is why I like this show, because we have folks listening from all over in different perspectives. So for example, let me get to the feedback over on our Patreon page. Michael Corbett, thanks for being a patron. I appreciate it very much. He says, in his 32 plus years of teaching, we've only had 2 snow days here in Utah. However, COVID has ruined that forever. Now we know how to teach online, and students theoretically know how to learn online. So we will no longer have snow days. Instead of a snow day, our district will just call for an online learning day. So sad. Michael's out in Lehigh, Utah. You know what? When COVID started and everybody moved to virtual learning, I did say this to my wife. I said, you will no longer have snow days because all the kids now have Chromebooks. You are doing distance learning, so there's no reason that weather should be an issue. And that has been the truth because she is still teaching. They've been online all the time since last March. They're going back here in March, I think. But the thing is, there's no reason for them not to have a snow day, and she has not. She has not had a snow day. On the other side of things, Mallory is upstairs right now as I'm recording here on a Thursday morning. She has had 5 consecutive snow days because they've been back full time, all year since August. And they've had 5 snow days because we have a very rural part of our district that the roads are just iced over. And so she's had 7 school days in a row canceled because they had 5 snow days. They had a professional development day on a Friday, and then President's Day was that following Monday. So she's going to forget where her school is by the time she goes back, hopefully tomorrow. We'll see. All right. So this is another piece of feedback here about snow days from Michelle Camber, my good friend down in Boynton Beach, Florida. Hope she's doing well. God, to be down there, spring training has started. I want to go to Jupiter. That's pretty close. My Cardinals are down there, pitchers and catchers right now. Oh, Michelle, you're living the life. She says, growing up in South Florida, we didn't have snow days except once. And all of a sudden my ears perked up. How do you have a snow day in South Florida? I asked. She said, in 1977, she said she was in pre-K. We had school canceled due to a very rare snow. It was one of my earliest memories. I remember my parents calling me outside. We were making teeny tiny snowballs from the frost on the cars. That was really it, but it made an impression. That is so crazy. I cannot believe South Florida had and I did have ice one time at Walt Disney World for a half marathon. But snow down in South Florida, I could just imagine how cool that would be for kids from South Florida, right? Like, this is snow. And I love it. I could just see scraping the frost off the cars because we did that as kids too. She also says we did have hurricane days often, though. My dad owned a service or gas station when I was growing up, and I remember often going there with him to help get the shop ready for the impending storm, specifically putting masking tape on all of the glass panes on the rolling bay doors. I guess that's for where the car's going, which of course we now know doesn't do anything. Another memory is Hurricane Wilma, when my daughter's school was out for 2 weeks due to the power being out. Not as fun as a snow day. That's right. I can't imagine, like, we have hurricanes in Missouri we have tornadoes. We don't have hurricanes in Missouri. Mike's crazy. No, we have tornadoes. And the thing about a tornado is they can be super destructive, but typically they're just like, you get notice of them. You'll find out the day before, like, okay, tomorrow, the weather's looking like there could be tornadoes. It's going to be, they're going to have some heat. It's going to be a big change in the temperature. Be ready. They always tell us, be weather aware. You may have like a, Torcon 7 day tomorrow for a tornado. But when they actually form, you have usually 10, 15 minutes, get yourself in the basement and wish for the best. There's not a lot of preparing. With hurricanes, they're so destructive and they cover such a large path, such a large, field that they cover. I just can't imagine, no. And the thing is, it's like, I almost feel the Jaws music, like do, 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 like, it's out there. And with all the coverage on like the Weather Channel and all these apps, you can watch this thing travel, across the Gulf of Mexico or across the Atlantic, and just, the cone changes, it shifts, it gets narrow, it widens out. So I can't imagine, just knowing that's coming and the destruction that it could cause if you were down in the, the path of a hurricane. But I guess, I hate to say it, you guys live in paradise. I mean, I wish you didn't have hurricanes. But man, I'd like to be down there right now instead of sitting here in a foot of snow and 14-degree weather. But hang in there. We just always want you to be safe. But yeah, hurricanes are no joke. And then Heather Hayden, thanks again, Heather, for being a patron. Growing up in Ontario, Canada, we rarely had snow days, but freezing rain would force school to be canceled. I remember one day our bus slid off the road twice. By the time we got to school, we ate lunch and got an early dismissal and got on the bus to come home. That is funny because like obviously in the South, they're not going to have snow days, but I've also heard in Canada, they don't have snow days because it's just a part of life. They're just more robust than we are. So what I've kind of assumed from all this discussion and everything I've learned is that snow days typically happen kind of in the middle of the United States or like the mid-South, like a little bit of snow or ice, Arkansas, Alabama, Mississippi, North Georgia, Tennessee, Kentucky, like you're done, you're out. Like you see a couple flakes, you're done, you're out. And as you go north, they just deal with it. They're a little bit more hardy than we are, but it's always, it's a fun thing because it's like an unexpected gift from God. No school today. Have fun, go sledding, watch some movies, and have a good time. So thanks for the feedback. If you want to leave feedback on today's episode, and I'd love to hear some because I love leading off the show with this, Just drop by patreon.com/BeOurGuest podcast and leave your thoughts there. Thanks to Heather, Michelle, and Michael. I appreciate that so very much. So today we have a topical story here. Just a few little stories I wanted to share from growing up. And the reason we're going to talk about space, I'm going to give some of my space related memories outside of working at space camp, because I did talk about that this afternoon, crossing our fingers. Something remarkable. I mean, remarkable could happen. Now, I say could happen. I think a lot of people just assume things will happen correctly. It would be a miracle if this happens perfectly. So if you've not been following the news, NASA has sent a rover. Again, we've done this many times, but NASA has sent a rover to Mars, and it is to land this afternoon around, let's see, 3:55 p.m. Eastern time. So just in a few hours from now. It's called the Perseverance rover, and it is supposed to, land on the surface of Mars today. Think about that. We sent basically like a small vehicle type shape, sized rover to land on Mars. It's a 9-month journey. This thing took off in July from Cape Canaveral. And when it gets there, it will have traveled 292.5 million miles from Earth. Think about that one more time. It has traveled 292.5 million miles. And they are so accurate at this stuff. They know exactly the crater they're going to land this thing in on Mars. Now, remember, stuff in space is moving, right? It is moving at a very fast pace. The math that goes into this is just unbelievable, because the Earth is rotating on its axis. Mars is rotating on its axis, and they're rotating around the sun at the same time. So lots of variables. And the cool thing about this rover is that it's going to have a little mini helicopter that's going to fly around the red planet. I mean, how cool. It's going to have like a drone basically to fly around. So cross your fingers that this happens, and you can watch it all kinds of places. Go online, but 3:55 Eastern, you might want to tune in a little bit earlier. It could be a big mess, and it could not. The good news is there's no humans or anybody on board. So if it crashes, a lot of money, a lot of work, but no human cost to that. So that makes me feel better. Anybody that grew up that's my age, I know Michelle's the same age, a lot of folks that we grew up with the Challenger, and it changed my life, right? I watched the Challenger accident in 6th grade at North County Christian School. We were watching it live when it happened. That was really the day I kind of wanted to become a teacher. And that leads me to one of my first things. I just want to give a few quick space related stories, since I'm thinking space today. I talked about working at space camp, but on that note, this is kind of another day where I'm going to be tuned in to see what happens with this Perseverance rover. I'm excited. I've been kind of watching the news over the past few weeks to see how the mission's going, but today will be the chance to watch live to see what's going on with it. Well, in 1986, we were watching live the Space Shuttle Challenger launched on January 28th from Cape Canaveral, cold January morning. And of course, we all know the story. The O-rings, they needed to be pliable. They weren't, because it was so cold. Some hot gas escaped one of the solid rocket boosters. That hot gas hit the external tank, which is the big orange tank in the middle, holds all the fuel. It's very thin. It's like it's the thickness of a tin can, like a soda can. Burned through it, ignited all the fuel, and the crew was lost. That changed the life of a lot of people, I think. And again, that's kind of when I wanted to become a teacher, because of course, Krista McAuliffe was going to be teaching science lessons on that mission from space. And I was pumped about that. I couldn't wait to see the lessons she was going to teach from the space shuttle, because I love the space shuttle. I watched the very first one, April 12th, 1981 at my grandma's house. I stayed home from school, Space Shuttle Columbia. What was different about that one? Solid rocket boosters were white. The external tank on that launch was white. They painted it white. It added 10,000 pounds to the payload just to paint it. And they used Sears paint. It was paint from Sears. Who knew? Anyway, one of the cool stories, I don't know if I shared this one in the space camp story, but I just want to give this one best things I ever got to do when I worked at space camp was that at the end of every summer, we had International Space Camp, which was invite only. It was just we sent an invite to the 50 teachers of the year from the United States. So for example, the Missouri State Teacher of the Year for that year would be invited to International Space Camp. The Florida State Teacher of the Year would get invited to International Space Camp. Every state got invited. And also we invited the international teachers of the year from their countries. So or territories. For example, when I taught, I had the Missouri State Teacher of the Year on my team. I had the Florida State Teacher of the Year. I had the Alabama State Teacher of the Year. But I also had the Teacher of the Year from Guam. I had the Teacher of the Year from the Philippines. I had Teacher of the Year from Russia. I had the Teacher of the Year from Colombia. Trying to think, because I did this for 2 or 3 years, and I had all these teachers from all over the planet, and it was very intimidating because I was just I was just a 6th grade teacher from Ferguson, Missouri. I wasn't a Teacher of the Year, but here I was leading for 6 days. I was leading these Teachers of the Year through all these great lessons and mock missions and all this at Space Camp. I just sat back and listened because these people were way smarter than me, and I learned way more than I could have ever taught them. It was an honor. But one of the things that we did was that we brought in special guests for these very special teachers. It wasn't like regular camp. Regular camp was cool, but this was like on steroids. It was amazing. Every night we had a big meal, a themed meal. Like one night we had a big crawdad. What are they called? I don't know. It was a Louisiana based meal. It had the big crawdads and the buckets, and they taught us, the Louisiana State Teacher of the Year taught us how to eat the crawdads and, pop out the, pinch them and get the meat out of them. It was crazy. Spicy foods, cornbread that night. It was pretty good. It was awesome. Anyway, we brought in Grace Corrigan, who was, Krista McAuliffe's mom. She came in and talked to the teachers both years I worked at International Space Camp, and just, really wanted to reassure them and thank them for what they were doing. She was such a sweet lady. But I volunteered. Well, I begged and I got the job. I got to drive the Space Camp vehicle out to Huntsville International Airport to pick her up when her flight came in and drive her into Space Camp and, get her settled in her hotel. And I would drive her back to the hotel. I got to do that both years. And it was very cool because, she was so kind to me. She was a little bitty lady. She didn't even say I'm 5 feet tall. And she's been through so much. She lost her daughter. She's advocated for teachers her entire life. And here I was, getting to pick her up. And I just, we got to talking. It was funny because the vehicle we drove at Space Camp to pick up dignitaries from the airport was called an Endeavor. It was a Mitsubishi Endeavor. And one of the space shuttles. I didn't know if that's why they bought it or not, but it was a nice little car. So I picked her up, and I just told her how, we talked. And of course she asked, well, what do you do here at Space Camp? And I said, well, I teach the teachers over the summer, but I'm just a 6th grade teacher back home. And, that's what I do for a living. I just come down here in the summer and work down here. And, she thanked me for being a teacher. And I was like, wow, that was pretty cool. And I said, no, thank you. I said, because your daughter changed the lives of so many students. I told her, I was in 6th grade, when the accident did happen, we were watching. And I said, that was kind of a turning point in my life. I thought that was very cool. She had inspired so many people to be excited over science lessons. That was super cool. I got super involved in that mission. And she was just so thankful of all teachers. She loved on the teachers. She took pictures. She signed autographs. She was just there asking. The thing was, she asked a lot of questions and she listened, and she loved the kind of lessons. She's like, well, what kind of lessons are you doing with science? Like, what do your students think about this? Or, how do your students, use computers? Because again, this is like 2001, 2002, 2003. And she was just, she's left us since. She's no longer with us, but man, she was such a sweet lady. So getting to meet Grace Corrigan, Krista's mom, was a true honor that I got to do when I worked at Space Camp. Now, some of the other cool things I've gotten to do space related that I just wanted to share here on this science and NASA kind of day is that when I was teaching at, back in Ferguson Florissant School District, one of the things my buddy Dave and I were space nuts. He taught 5th grade across the hall. I taught 6th grade, and we were like best friends. He was in my wedding, and, he hung out with Pam and I. We were always together, and we always did all these cool space things. He went to Space Camp with me when I went the first time as a teacher educator. So we went together, and we always had all these great ideas. But one of the things we always wanted for our district was to have a Challenger Center. And if you don't know what a Challenger Learning Center is, it's kind of like a mini Space Camp where kids go and they can do mock missions. Now, it's not as cool as Space Camp because it doesn't have like a full-size orbiter. You don't get to do like the 1/6 gravity chair, the multi-axis trainer and stuff like that. But you do get to, kind of have like a mock mission control. And then there's a mock space station where you do some science experiments. So it's very, very cool. Now, these Challenger centers were started in honor of the Challenger crew when they passed away. Instead of making a big memorial to them, they started these Challenger learning centers around the country where kids could go and simulate being an astronaut, which was very cool. It was a living memorial. And certain school districts had these around the country. We didn't have one in ours, but we kept advocating to the Board of Education and to people higher up in our district we should have one of these. Because one of the reasons is because one of our teachers in our district came in fourth in the teacher in space program behind Krista, Barb Morgan. There was somebody else, and he was fourth. And actually, we taught his son later on. He was in Pam's class. Anyway, we really advocated for this. So they were like, okay, stop bugging us about this. I think it would be cool, but I mean, there's a big process. So they sent us, Dave and I, to Brownsburg, Indiana. That was the closest Challenger learning center to our district. So we drove out there. We spent 2 days watching lessons and kids go through this Challenger center, and we were hooked. We were like, this was awesome. Now, while we're there, we're both sports fans. So after the classes ended the one night, we went and got our picture in front of the place where the Indiana Pacers play. We got our picture in front of the Indy Speedway. We got our picture in front of Victory Field where the minor league team plays. And of course, in front of the RCA Dome. That's how old we are. That was before Lucas Oil. So, we brought that back. And then eventually, the long story short is we did get awarded a Challenger Learning Center in our district for St. Louis. And so we were the first hires, Dave and I. And we got to be on the team that got to help build, and not physically build, like we weren't construction workers, but we got to be in there and, stock the center as it was coming together. We got to, help develop they give you a curriculum, but help, refine it to what we wanted to do. But we got to put everything together and run the very first missions. We got to do all the media coverage for the grand opening and stuff like that. And it was so awesome because it was something that our district needed, our city of St. Louis needed. It's for our entire, it's for the entire eastern side of Missouri. And it was cool to see it come together. And I was on the opening day team for that with Dave. And I always remember that because that's something that, it reminded me of when I sat in sixth grade. Wow. Like I was a sixth grader just sitting in a class at North County Christian School. And now here I am on the opening team of Challenger Learning Center. Chase your dream, right? And just don't take no for an answer. Keep at it and things can happen. So that was a cool experience that I had. Some other ones. So back when Twitter was younger, Twitter came out, I think in 2006, NASA wanted to really reach out and expand its message right through Twitter and through social media. And back in the day, NASA held these things called NASA tweet ups. Excuse me. And what it was basically was just, you could apply to NASA and they would pick, 40 or 50 people off social media from various fields. Did not have to be teachers, did not have to be scientists. I mean, you could be, a stay-at-home person. You could be, somebody that works at Chick-fil-A. It didn't matter. It was supposed to be random because they wanted to give regular people access to extraordinary things that NASA does. And the only thing they asked was that you take your social media and you take pictures and you tweet and you share what's going on to your audience, because we all have different audiences. I'm like, I'm a Disney guy, but they picked me. I don't know why, but I think it could have been random. But we got to go along with Jay Griffith, my good buddy, who's a pilot down in Florida. We got to go to a NASA tweet up for the launch of the second to last space shuttle, Atlantis, down in Florida. And not only did we get to, go to the launch, but we got to sit on press row where you see the families of the astronauts where they watch by the big old clock. We got to go out to the clock. We were right there at the clock and the flagpole, and we got to watch that space shuttle go up. And I mean, I will never forget being that as close as we could be, as close as the families are to the launch. We were there on press row and just got the concussion of the sound, because you see it going up and it goes up silently at first. Just it kind of whistles. The space shuttle rose. And then all of a sudden, this wall of sound is hitting the concussion into your chest. Oh, because I've been to 4 or 5 space shuttle launches on the Causeway, but this was even worse. It was just amazing. It almost knocked you over. And it was just, tears. You're so close. And the humans riding this rocket into space. They're going to be in space in 8 minutes. It was incredible. So I got to go to that NASA tweet up. It was amazing. You got to talk to astronauts and folks that were in the white room. The closeout crew came in and talked about things. They brought in, parts of the space shuttle that were small enough to look at, mechanical things. it was just for a space nut, it was a dream. And NASA just randomly picked me for that. And I was so thankful. And they still do have these things. They're not all space. They're not obviously there's no space shuttle launches. They're not all launches, but now you can go, maybe to Ames or, wherever you can go to these NASA centers and just get to do these things. So do follow NASA because they do still do things like this. One of the other things on a related note was I loved it. I had a great time. You had to pay your way for all these things, but it was worth it. I also got picked for a second one down at Mission Control Houston. And so I had never been to Texas. And this was, again, before I would fly. I was still a big chicken. So I rented a car and I drove from St. Louis. This was when Mallory was real young. Drove all the way out to Houston, Texas. And I learned, for one thing, that there's no interstates like from Missouri to Houston as you go through Texas. I was on these 2-lane roads through all these small Texas towns, which was actually really cool because I got to see some high school football stadiums that were almost the size of Mizzou. It was crazy. Got to see all these towns. But I mean, I was like in the middle of, it felt like I was in the middle of nowhere for like 75% of the drive, totally by myself. Got a cheap La Quinta hotel to stay for the night when I got there. Then the next day was full of, touring Mission Control in Houston. And God, it was so amazing. We got to go into Mission Control and see the actual from the press gallery. We got to look down on, the control. They were talking to the International Space Station. They were monitoring things, and we got to go to the historic, Apollo era Mission Control, which they don't use anymore, but we got to go down in there. I got to sit in the chair that, Gene Kranz was in during Apollo 13. I mean, it was just, I got to sit in the chair for the MOCR, every position during Apollo 11 when Buzz and Neil landed on the moon. I mean, heck, I was there, like history. It was just, for a space geek like me, it was amazing. I loved it. So thanks again to NASA for having me down in Houston. Now that was a crazy one because that was only one day long. I drove down, got there late at night, spent the night. The next day was the NASA tweet up. And I just drove home through the night the next day. So, and it was a crazy long, hard drive, but it was, I would do it again in a heartbeat. Houston was cool. And also I drove down to Galveston so I could see the Gulf of Mexico. I'd never seen that. Weird. Galveston is weird. It's got all these like cemeteries around it with these graves that are above the ground. I know it's low to the water table, but it was a strange looking place for somebody from Missouri. Okay. Finally, last story that I want to share, and I have so many more, and that's why we're just going to do these every Thursday. I'll spit them out as time allows. Was when I was working at Space Camp. Now, if you don't know, Space Camp is located on the grounds of the Marshall Space Flight Center in Huntsville, Alabama. So they gave a part of their land to Space Camp to build the museum and to build, the educational part of Space Camp and so forth. But on special occasions, like International Space Camp, we got to go into Marshall Space Flight Center and tour the Space Center itself. We didn't get to do this often. We got to do this a couple times while I was there. And one of the things that stands out to me is that not only, what Marshall's specialty was, they worked on the not the external tanks, that's down at Stennis in Mississippi, but they worked on the solid rocket boosters. That was one of their projects. And they also had the control for the International Space Station, mission control for ISS. So we got to tour that, which was very cool. That was shared also between Houston. But we got to go into the fabrication part of Marshall Space Flight Center where they actually physically build things. Now, I don't know, but maybe you or your family has gotten to go into like industrial places a lot in your life. I have not. My dad and my grandpa were cement masons. So when I went to see them work, they were putting in patios and driveways and basements. And, sometimes they would do commercial work, approaches and so forth at banks and so forth. But they were always working on cement, outside or inside of buildings. It wasn't really industrial. So I've not been in many factories. Well, we go into these factories, these big, just huge buildings at Marshall Space Flight Center. They're all looking the same on the outside, right? You can't tell what's happening inside. We went inside. Now, again, this was like 2003 at the latest. And they showed us, I still remember this. They showed us this machine. We're going around and taking my teachers around, and I'm like the biggest kid there, right? I'm just like, I can't believe I'm in here. This is unreal. They show us this machine. It's this cube, this very, very large cube with plexiglass on all sides. And what it was, they didn't even call it this at the time. It was a 3D printer, and it was printing parts that they were using for models for the things they were building at scale. And I just remember standing there. I stood there for like 20 minutes and I watched this printer just bzz, 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 but instead of printing, it was printing three-dimensional white plastic replicas of this. And you could see they had, because it was a display, they had, something like a piece of paper of what it was going to print in a two-dimensional piece of paper, but in 3 dimensions inside this 3D printer. Again, printers weren't even that great in 2003, and this thing was 3D printing replicas of pieces that they were going to build at scale for space flying, technology. I was just like, I couldn't believe it. Like the first time you see something, there's a few times in life where the first time you see the technology demonstrated, you're just like, what? That's voodoo. That's magic. There's just certain things like that, especially if you're my age. If you're younger, you might not have that kind of wonder. I still do. And I still remember sitting there like, wait, this is printing something, but it's printing like with some kind of resin coming out of that printer ribbon or whatever we called it back in the day. And it is actually going to have a physical 3-dimensional object as the output instead of just a piece of paper. I was dumbfounded. I was also dumbfounded by how clean they kept everything. Everybody was walking around in bunny suits. Now we didn't get to go in those rooms, but we got to look down from a balcony. And it was just in how big space things are, like how large they are, and how folks have to climb on scaffolds to work on them. And you see stuff in movies, but when you see it in person, that this piece right here that you're looking at is going to fly into space, and it's got to be perfect because millions and millions of dollars of hardware is dependent upon this thing functioning correctly one time. It was truly amazing. So getting to meet Grace, Miss Corrigan, was amazing. I was so lucky to do that. Getting to go to those NASA tweet ups, both at Kennedy Space Center and at Johnson Space Center down in Houston, unbelievable experiences. And also getting to tour Marshall Space Flight Center as part of my job at Space Camp. Just amazing experiences that I don't think just a regular guy from Missouri would ever expect to do in his lifetime. And I've been lucky enough to get to do those things. Now, here's your part. Are you a space fan? What's your level of space fandom? And tell me something that has really intrigued you about space, or what's a cool space experience that you've had in your life? Maybe because of where you live, maybe because of a job you've had, or maybe just because, it's something that you just fell into, like my experiences. I've just gotten very, very lucky. Let me know over on the Patreon, patreon.com/BeOurGuestPodcast. Again, thank you so very much for supporting the podcast. I promise to always get those 4 shows out a week for you guys. The financial support really does help us kind of get through this time where a lot of folks are canceling trips, and it's okay. I mean, we book them and we cancel them and we reschedule things, but I will always want to keep the podcast going, and it's because of you all. And I just cannot thank you enough for that. Your contribution really does help keep things going. As soon as we get things back to 2019 levels, we'll figure something out. I'm not going to take your money after that because we'll have things settled. But I really do appreciate it right now when we need the help. So you guys have a great Thursday and a great weekend. Stay safe and healthy wherever you are. Let's cross our fingers for perseverance this afternoon. Oh, I hope it works. And yeah, let's do that. And I'll see you guys real soon. All right, everybody. Hey. Oh, yeah, we're going to watch. All right. See you guys. See you, Jen. See you, Herschel.